everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Darian and today I am going to be doing a book review. So last night I finished reading Radio Silence by Oseman. I know I'm very late to the game on this one. Most people read this like last year or the year before. Everyone's been talking about this book for so long. Everyone's been telling me to read this book and I finally picked it up this month and it was absolutely amazing. I mean, I was expecting to love it, but it just surpassed all my expectations. It was so good. I gave it 5 stars. It was definitely a new favorite book of mine. I just loved it so much. So I wasn't even planning on reviewing this book, but I felt like I just had so much to say about it, so I decided to do a book review. This is going to be a completely spoiler-filled review, mostly because there's just so much that I want to say that pertain to specific plot points in the book. There's not that much, I feel like there's not that much that I can say that, you know, won't give away something that happens in the book. So if you have not read this book, first of all, please go read it. I'm sure so many people have told you to read this book, but I highly recommend. So if you don't want to be spoiled for this book, then maybe stop the video now and then come back to it when you have read it. But for those of you who have read this book, which I feel like most of you have, because yeah, like I said, I feel like everyone's already read this book. But yeah, so stick around if you have read this book and want to hear my detailed thoughts. So I don't even know where to start. I didn't write any notes for this review. I just wanted to just chat about this book. So when I started reading this, I didn't really know what this was about before I started it. All I knew was that we followed this girl and this guy who become friends, and I had heard that there was no romantic relationship in this book, that like this boy and girl, they just stay friends. There's no romantic tension at all, which honestly, because I love romance, so when I heard this I was like a little disappointed. Like I was like, oh, like a contemporary without a romance, I don't read too many of those. But you know, I still wanted to read this book, and I did also hear that there was some sort of podcast in this book, but that's really all I knew. I didn't know too much about it besides those things. So of course we're following Francis and Aled. I mean, if you're still here, you have read the book because I'm going to be spoiling it, so I don't need to give you guys a synopsis. But as soon as we were introduced to Francis, immediately I felt this connection to her. I found her so relatable, especially with the whole like how obsessed she was with doing well in school. And I think they're in high school is from what I understood, because they're in England and the school system is obviously a bit different than where I live in Canada, especially me because I live in Quebec and everything is different here. So Frances is just so stressed. Her dream her whole life has been to go to Cambridge because that's basically what she's been told is like the best option, basically, is to do well in school, get amazing grades, and go to this prestigious university. So that's what she's been working towards for her whole life. And I mean, I never, like, when I was in high school, it's not like I had dreams to go to like Harvard or anything like that, but I put so much pressure on myself in high school to do well in school. And I remember there was one part in the book where Frances was saying like, no, even though she did well on every single test and exam and like project and stuff, whenever there was another test coming up, she would get so stressed, and it wouldn't even matter that she's never done badly before because she was like convinced that this was the one that she was going to do badly on. And that's exactly what my experience was when I was in high school. Like, I did really well in high school. I got really good grades. I was always on the honor roll, like, but I was so obsessed with like continuing to do well because for some reason I had it in my head that if I didn't do well, then I don't know what, like, I don't know what I thought would happen. I thought I would drop out of school, I would fail, like, I don't know what I thought would happen, but I just had this ingrained in my brain that I needed to do well or else. But like, we don't really go further than that. We don't say or else what, like it's just or else. And like Frances's mom was not very strict with her. She wasn't saying like, Frances, you have to do well or else, whatever, like, so, and that was kind of my experience too, because it's not like my parents were putting pressure on me in high school to do well. Like, they always just wanted me to try my best, and that's all that mattered. And that's the same with Frances's mom. So like we just had very similar experiences with school, and I just appreciated it so much that she felt like the exact same way I felt. So then we have Aled, who also really wants to do well in school, but for him, he does have his mom who is pressuring him so much to do well. And I mean, his mom was absolutely evil, like probably one of the most evil characters I've ever read, including like, you know, the villains in fantasy books. Like I thought she was a monster, basically. Like the way like we found out about how she treated Karis, Aled's sister, and then she just, I mean, the things she said and did to Aled, because for some reason for her, it was so important to her that he do well and that he go to university. And you know, as we find out later on, is he never wanted to. He hated university, but I'll get to that a bit later on. But one thing I found with this book is that Aled's mom kind of was the personification of this stress that we feel in school. Like, I know not everyone felt the same way as me, like some people didn't really care about doing well, but I know a lot of my friends felt the same way, in that before exams we were always crying because we were so stressed, and if we got worse on a test than we had wanted to, then we would cry, like, because we were just so stressed all the time. And so I found that Aled and Karis's mom kind of represented, she was kind of like the embodiment of the pressure that we as students put on ourselves, because the way, like I said, my parents never put this pressure on me to do well, but it's just the way that our society is, that if you want to be successful, you have to do well in school, and you have to get a really high paying job and go to an esteemed university. And like the way that like Karis was explaining that when she still lived at home, if she didn't do well on a test, then her mom wouldn't let her see her friends for a weekend, or her mom would like literally lock her in her room. And then like her mom freaking, she burns her hands by accident because she's burning her clothes. Like, this woman is so evil. But like I just found that she kind of represented this fear we have, because it does kind of, when you're like in that mode and you're just so stressed about doing well in school and stuff like that, it does kind of feel like if I don't do well on this test, then I will have a severe consequence, like equal to being locked in my room, having my mom burn my clothes, like something like that. So I don't know if I'm explaining this well enough, but I just found that the mom was used as kind of like a metaphor for how, like, just the stress we feel and the pressure we feel to do well in school. And I found that Alice Oseman kind of gave that feeling, she made that feeling tangible by putting that into like a person, and that was her whole personality, was to make her kids suffer if they didn't do well in school. Does that make sense? I hope it does. But yeah, so I thought that was really interesting and really brilliant, honestly, because, you know, at the end, like, Aled hates his mom, which represents his hatred for school, and he does not want to go to university. And then at the end, he breaks out of that. He like breaks away from his mom and decides not to go to university, and that's kind of him overcoming his fear that he has to do well in school. So I thought all that was very interesting and so well done. And another thing I want to talk about is, as soon as Frances and Aled meet each other, like I just cared about these two so much. And like, I buddy read this with Sasha and Rachel, and I messaged them like when I was a few chapters in, and I was like, I don't know why, but I just want to cry while I'm reading this. And I still can't fully explain why, but I just found that they just felt so real. Like, as soon as we met them, they just felt like real people, that I was reading about these two very real people, and this beautiful friendship that they had. It was so, like I said before, I thought I would be disappointed that there wouldn't be a romance in this book, but like, I cannot imagine these two getting together at all. Like, their friendship was just so beautiful, and like, I don't know, I love that they found each other, because like, Frances didn't really have any real friends before him, and I mean, he had Daniel, I guess, but neither of them really ever had like a best friend that shared all their interests and, you know, Frances loved Universe City, which she finds out Aled created, and he finds out that she's the one who's been doing this fan art. And I just thought their friendship was so beautiful, and I like that whole beginning of the book where they're just always hanging out and they're making the Universe City episodes. Like, it just made my heart so happy. I thought that was just so beautiful, and I think these characters just literally saved each other. I mean, like, they both were kind of in a really dark place. I mean, especially Aled, you know, near the end of the book, but I think Frances too, like, she was just doing schoolwork all the time, and none of her friends really were nice to her. Like, they kind of made fun of her that she was a nerd and stuff like that. And so I just thought, I mean, again, I thought their friendship was just really beautiful to read, and they just felt like really human characters. And then I need to talk about the representation of depression in this book, because I don't think it's ever explicitly said, but I think we can all agree that Aled was depressed, severely depressed by the end of this book. Well, for most of the book, honestly, but he was just, he went through such a hard time. My God. My poor baby. I love him so much, and I just want the best for him. And I think Alice Oseman just wrote his character so brilliantly, because when he has that outburst at Frances around the middle of the book, when, you know, like, all the fans of Universe City are starting to find out who the creator is and that he's the one who created the podcast, and he just wanted this to be a private thing for him, and he just like fully blows up at Frances. And I find that in any other book at this part I would have been like, oh my God, Aled is such a jackass. Like, look at him yelling at Frances like this. She doesn't deserve this. But because we know him so well by this point, we know that obviously it wasn't right of him to yell at her like that. But at the same time, it's like, he is really going through something. For him to yell at her like that, like, that's something he would literally never do. So he, like, we knew that he was not okay, that there was something really deep that was wrong with him and that he was struggling with. And Frances knew it too. And then he goes away to university, and he, like, I love how his character was written, because the thing with depression, which is really hard, like, from what I've noticed, people who do not suffer from depression, I find that they don't completely, like, I feel like you can't completely understand what people who are, who do have depression are going through. Because when you're depressed, like, there are some things that you just literally can't do. Like, there are some days where you literally can't get out of bed, you can't take a shower, you can't get dressed, you can't go anywhere. Like, you just are kind of debilitated and immobilized, I guess. Like, it's something you physically cannot do. And I feel like it's so easy for people on the outside to be like, oh my God, like, they didn't even get out of bed. Like, all you have to do is get up and get out of bed, you know? But when you're going through that, like, as someone who has suffered with depression, like, it's hard to explain, aside from just, like, sometimes you just can't do something. And Aled, like, one of the biggest things was that Frances and Daniel were like, why won't he just text me back? Why isn't he answering our text messages? And, like, Aled was trying to kind of explain this at the end, but, like, it was just something that he literally could not do because of, like, all that stuff that was going through his mind. Like, he was thinking, like, if I text them back, then they'll think this, and then they'll think this, and then, like, it turns into a spiral. And so he, like, physically can't, and like he said, like, he typed messages and then erased them. He just physically could not send, he could not answer their messages. And, like, I don't know, I don't know if this is making any sense, but I just really appreciated how depression was written, because, like I said, I've, you know, dealt with depression and I always, like, put myself down, because if I can't do something, then my brain immediately goes to, like, well, you're just really lazy, you're so lazy, like, you can't even do this, you're lazy. And it was just kind of nice to see someone dealing with something similar. Not that it was nice, but, like, I felt very validated seeing someone dealing with something similar, in that he just he was in such a dark place by the end of this book, and he just Like, I think they said he wasn't going to classes. Like, his room was a mess. He couldn't even clean his room. He wasn't cutting his hair. He just wasn't doing anything because he just couldn't. He was so depressed, and I just thought depression was represented really well in this book, and it really meant a lot to me, and this book meant a lot to me. So whether it was the anxiety, and like Frances also dealt with a bit of depression, but she was mostly anxiety that she felt about school, and then Alan's depression and just about life and his relationships with his friends and with Daniel and Frances. And his mom, obviously, and Karis. I just really appreciated the discussion on depression, and just the fact that Frances knew, like, she understood. She was never, like, I feel like Frances could have easily been like, you know what, I don't need to deal with this. Like, he yelled at me, I don't want to deal with him anymore. Like, she knew there was something wrong with him. She knew that he was not okay, and she never gave up on him, and I just thought that was so beautiful. And I definitely cried by the end. Like, ugh, this book was so beautiful, and yeah. Also, to add just like the cherry on top of the cake, we found out at the end that Aled is demisexual, which I've never seen in a book before, and it made me so happy. I mean, I had a feeling, like, the more the book went on, I kind of had a feeling that he was maybe on the ace spectrum because of how, like, Daniel kind of explained, like, he never seemed to want to do anything, and he thought that Alan didn't like him that way. And I was like, maybe he's asexual. And yeah, then we found out he's demisexual, and I was like, oh, I love to see that representation. And it just makes me more excited to read Loveless, because I know that asexuality is going to be represented so well, especially also since it's an own voices story. Also, just as a side note, I freaking loved Frances's mom. She was so cool, and I loved their relationship. It was so cool, and I'm glad, like, Karis kind of decided to help Frances find Aled. And oh, and the ending was so sweet with him at, like, the convention with Frances, and everyone was excited to see him. And, like, when Frances said she saw a girl in the crowd dressed as Toulouse, which is like her character kind of, I just thought that was so sweet. Like, this book was just so good. I feel like I'm forgetting stuff, but, like, this video is probably long enough already, but it was just so good, and I really just appreciated it so much, and it means a lot to me, and I definitely understand now why everyone loves this book so much. So I wasn't even planning, I think I said this at the beginning, I wasn't even planning on filming a review for it, but I felt like I just needed to gush a bit and talk about why this book meant so much to me. And yeah, so I think that's all I have to say. Hopefully I didn't forget anything, but also I'm glad that Frances realized that she didn't want to go to university either, and she's gonna pursue art, because that's what she's actually passionate about. So yeah, but anyways, I hope you guys liked me rambling a bit about Radio Silence, and if you have read it, which hopefully you have, because I just spoiled everything for you, but yeah, if you have read it, definitely we can talk about it in the comments. Tell me what you liked about the book, and, you know, why Aled is such a little bean that must be protected at all costs. But yeah, so thank you to everyone who recommended this book to me. I'm so glad I read it. But yeah, so thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you guys soon with another video soon. Bye!